and so with the rainy seasons now upon us, and we've had to be kind of all hands on deck, if you will, to remedy the situation so it doesn't reoccur and my whole hill doesn't wash away. So we're busy with it. We realize we need to get a whole gutter and downspout system for the water on my house, and we priced it out with some professionals, but it was way beyond our our capacity. So we have to figure out how to do it ourselves, which we're trying to do, and that's been keeping us busy. Otherwise, Guru Nishta is about to take off for Finland and the launch of his book, for which he just did a very enlivening. I wasn't there, but I heard an interview for Ukai, which is the nearest town. It's going to be on the front page of their next edition. We live here in Mendocino County. We're like Mendocino radicals, back to nature, back to the land. There's a huge bunch of us here, all kinds of people with the spirit. There are Buddhist ashrams and various spiritual groups and so on and so forth. So we're through his book, we're entering into coming out of the scene a little bit more. My books have been focused on Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and they're a little impenetrable, I would say, for the average spiritual seeker to begin with. Although I'm going to start doing some introductory books from some of the devotees. So Harijan has been helping. Chaitanya Daya is going to help. I think that Lita Saki will want to help also with the transcribed lectures, which Pujapad Sridhara Maharaja's books, for example, were largely composed of, and focus on some more general introductory topics. So, but anyway, his book is coming out, and it's a very interesting one. And in my, more esoteric book, if you will, much more esoteric, Circle of Friends, is still waiting for the index. But after we get that, we'll plug it in. It'll go back to Lita Saki, I guess. So she'll have to proofread that. And but it should be out shortly. So that's the news. What are the questions this morning?
Right. Excuse me. Let's start with Raj Hari's. He has two questions, but I'll ask one at a time. Raj Hari says, considering that, oh, by the way, we have a substitute translator today. It's Chandra-lila from Chile. And so I'm going to go a little slower because she hasn't done this live translation before.
Okay,
so
good.
Considering that the pastimes of Prema-Samputa occur after Rasa-lila, the abandonment of Sri Krishna to the gopis, etc., and that on the first day of Kartik, quote, Krishna Sharadya Rasa-yatra is celebrated, can we say that the reading of the Prema-Samput during Kartik has a certain chronological coherence?
Well, I think I mentioned it last week that I look at the book, and I don't know if it's been commented on in that way, but excuse me. When I look at the book as the day after Rasa-lila, Krishna begins to make his plans, and so his plans, given what they are, to try to taste being a rasika, as he is trying to taste the bhava of Radha, he has to understand it a little better and come up with a plan to experience it. Of course, he has a plan, which is to become a sadhu, and that comes out in the key verse that is the genesis, if you will, in the Bhagavatam of Caitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. That's in the must be the 32nd chapter of the fourth of the 5 chapters dealing with the Rasa-lila in the Bhagavatam, when Krishna returns to the gopis after having deserted them, if you will, and disappeared from Radha as well. So anyway, yeah, I think we can look at it, if I understand your question correctly, like that. It's one of the specialties of the Kartik month. Is interesting because it can be, it's celebrated in terms of the high point of Madhurya Rasa, which is what we're talking about at the moment. Rasa-lila is the high point, is the apex, the zenith of the Bhagavatam, that everything builds up to and everything reflects back onto, if properly understood, everything that comes after it. Um, and uh, and and after that night, then Krishna's on his way, if you will. We go to Prema-Samputa, Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakura. But that's the high point, I want to say, of Madhurya Rasa. Now, this is an aside, separate from the question, just comes to my mind. Then from the Vatsalya point of view, the high point of Vatsalya in Bhagavatam also occurs during Kartik, which is also called the Damodar month. And that, of course, is the binding of Krishna to the mortar on the part of Yashoda, her being able to capture him, if you will, by her love, encircle him, even though everything is inside of him. So we have, from the Madhurya point of view and the Vatsalya point of view, the high points of these two sentiments are celebrated in the Kartik month. And then Vatsalya and Sakyaras also similarly, because in Sakyaras, the high point, in one sense, it's a very high point, is Krishna's entering into Poganda. So that's the Gopastami. Gopastami, Krishna becomes and passes from the end of his Kumar Lila, when he's herding calves, into his boyhood Lila, which is very special for Sakyarasa. And this is the day that they become free, the boys, to go without unchaperoned, and they don't have to come home early, and they've graduated from calf herding to cow herding. Big celebration throughout the Braj. So we have the high point for Madhurya Ras, Vatsalya Ras, and Sakyaras all occurring during this auspicious month of Kartik. But yes, back to your question, if I understand it correctly, I would look at it chronologically like that. Is there another part to the question, or a second question from?
It's actually a second question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually connected. He says, how many types of Rasa-lila between Radha and Krishna are mentioned in the scriptures? In the calendar, I have found that one is indicated at the beginning of the month of Kartik, Sharadya Rasayatra, another at the end of Kartik, and another in the month of Chaitra, which is Vasanta Ras. Furthermore, during the discovery of Radha-kunda, Sri Chaitanya prays, quote, in that lake, Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani used to sport daily in the water and have a rasa dance on the bank.
Well, the rasa dance is a technical term. It's actually a type of classical dance where I think the lover and the beloved put their arms around one another's necks, and it's accompanied by a certain type of music, and it's a circle, and there are it's kind of more like like, well, in my country we have this. Sometimes you have like well, anyway, it's like a choreographed. I was thinking of country music. Sometimes they dance in a certain way, but but nowadays, of course, there's a lot of choreographed dance accompanying music and so forth. Become very popular. I always like the Indian Bollywood shows where all of a sudden, and it's a musical, as we would call it in the West, it breaks out. An emotional moment reaches a certain point, and it breaks out, and everybody goes wild, singing and dancing and celebrating that moment, the rasa.
I'm
Yes?
sorry to break it, but can you speak a little slower? Trying to realize, struggling a little bit.
Forgive me. Yes, the guru can ask for forgiveness sometimes from the disciple. He can do that. And if he's proven wrong, certainly he'll agree. But if he's not proven wrong, then he won't agree. So in this case, I've been warned and I did not heed the warning. So please forgive me. And I might have said that too fast. So I will try to slow down. But the Rasa-lila is a certain type of classical dance, and it means it includes a number of maidens, and I believe it includes a number of heroes and heroines. But in the case of Krishna's Rasa-lila, of course, he's the only hero. And well, that may seem odd, but if you study Krishna from Ujjwal Nilmani of Rupa Goswami, for example, we find that all of the classical types of heroes in drama, in Indian drama, Indian aesthetics, there are so many different types. I think there are the basic heroes, the Dhira Lalita, Dhira Prashanta, Dhira Datta, Dhira Datta. And then Rupa Goswami combines them in different ways. It comes out to, I think, 93 or 96 or 94 types of heroes. And Krishna, the point is, if we study him, we'll see all of those types of heroes can be seen at one time or another in him. So he's the superhero. And it's appropriate then for him to be the only hero of such extremely dedicated, selfless love like we see in the Gopikas of Braj. So, of course, he expands himself to dance with each one at the same time. And each one thinks he's focusing on her, and each one is right and wrong at the same time. That's Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's full of such apparent contradictions. They're resolved in him. But to your question, I answer like this to begin with because it's a particular type of dance. Now, the term Rasa-lila in Gaudiya Vaishnavism sometimes may be used a little more loosely, but this is the classical idea. And you ask, how many times does it occur? Well, once it occurs in the Prakat Lila, in the manifest Lila, then it occurs every night, every single night. You could draw that from Krishna Bhavanamrita or Krishna Bhuvanililamrita. And so it's a regular fare, occurs every night. That said, in the classical texts, the Bhagavatam and Gita Govinda, we find emphasis on two specific Rasa-lilas. The Kartik month, Sardiya Purnim, now, and the Vasant, springtime Rasa-lila. Those are brought out in particular, and differences are underscored for the attentive reader in each of them. One of the distinguishing characteristics of the Sard Purnim Rasa-lila during this time, the harvest moon in Braj, is that as it's depicted in the Bhagavatam, it offers an opening as a portal for sadhakas to enter into, and from there proceed to the Aprakat Lila. Whereas in the Vasant Rasa-lila, perhaps mentioned in other texts, but played out in some detail in Gita Govinda, there is no entrance there for sadhakas. one point of difference. The other point of difference is that in the Sar Purnim Rasa-lila, Krishna leaves and the gopis and Radha go after him. And then he separates from the gopis and meets with Radha alone, only to leave her. But in the Vasant Rasa-lila, Radharani leaves the Rasa dance and Krishna goes after her. She becomes upset that he's dancing with so many others and doesn't feel he's giving her the attention that her love warrants, which is a good argument to make, given that all these gopis are all different expressions of herself. Udva Nilmani also brings this out. There are so many heroines, I think maybe 360 some different types of heroines. They're all fully embodied in Radha. So all these gopis are different partial manifestations of Mahabhav Swarupini, Radha. So she leaves the Rasa dance and Krishna leaves after her. So that Vasant Rasa-lila is thought by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who comments on it in Chaitanya Charitamrita, during the Ramananda Samvad, the conversation between Roy Ramananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He points out this difference and how the Vasant Rasa-lila underscores the point that much more of Krishna's being subjugated by the force and the power, the charm of Radharani's love. So these are the two main Rasa-lilas. And at the same time, there's one every night. So it's perpetual, it's eternal. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. That was quite comprehensive. So the Brighton Sangha is actually celebrating Srila Sridhara Maharaja's appearance day, which is tomorrow. And they have been graced by the presence of two disciples of Srila Sridhara Maharaj. Let me quickly check. It is Kundalata Devi and Trilokanath Prabhu. And the devotees were hoping that Guru Maharaj could say some words about Srila Sridhara Maharaj. Oh, actually, it would be nice to get a close-up from Brighton of the disciples of Srila Sridhara Maharaj. Let me pin it here.
So we can see this is Srila Kanath Prabhu here. Can you see it there? And can we see the
Vachakalpa Patitanam Pavani Vishnu Namo Namaha Vitiraksha Akshiradev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. So, well, yes, auspicious day tomorrow. Of course, I've lectured on this many times, and those are available to listen to. But thank you for the opportunity to say something about Guru Maharaj, who I would say, with the, if you will, metaphorically speaking, the setting of the sun of Prabhupada auspicious worldwide campaign of preaching, which was so bright and luminous that other stars of the night of Gaudiya Vaishnavism either were obscured or voluntarily stood back, offering pranam to the Avesh, as Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj did, of Prabhupada as he considered, the Avesh of Nityananda Prabhu, who was doing extraordinary work at a particular time in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj was a great admirer of the campaign of Prabhupada, and with, as I began, the setting of the sun of Prabhupada's campaign, without effort, as it occurs in the firmament, the moon, the cooling, soothing moon of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj's insights, his affection, his standing in Vaishnavism came to the fore in the lives, particularly of Prabhupada's disciples, to take advantage of it. Was, I say effortlessly, because at the time, unfortunately, a number of my godbrothers were making an effort to put some focus on themselves, trying to fit into the shoes of Prabhupada and serve in the capacity of guru for the Sangha, for ISKCON, as Prabhupada wanted them to do, and as Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, Guru Maharaj wanted them to do also. But effortlessly, he arose like the moon rises with the setting of the sun, and it was very soothing and very cooling, comforting, and very, I would say, well, the moon is the gives life, gives juice to the vegetables. It's a Krishna's compared to the moon. It's a rasa kind of metaphorical comparison. So the sweet and inner more esoteric dimensions of Gaudiya Vaishnavism were very expertly and tastefully brought to our attention by Guru Maharaj in a way that was very comforting, soothing, invigorating, enlivening. And some of us, speaking of Prabhupada's disciples like myself, were able to take advantage of that. Not everybody was, but not everybody was able to take advantage of Krishna when he appeared, or Caitanya Mahaprabhu either. But I say that expertly and tastefully, in that I'll give an example. One of my godbrothers, some years later, had been listening to another sadhu, hearing from another sadhu who was speaking about higher topics, Madhurya Rasa, and some details and so forth. And he was passing the topics on that he had heard to other devotees, and his experiences were that they were misunderstanding it, and it was becoming a problem. So he asked me, he said, how did Sridhar Maharaj talk about higher topics in such a way that they weren't misunderstood or confused and so forth? And one of the ways in which I answered was that, well, he spoke about higher topics sparingly, with a little more emphasis than Prabhupada did. Their campaigns, obviously, their roles were different. Prabhupada was very wide in his campaign, and Sridhar Maharaj was ministering to a few who had come from that campaign to help to nourish them in its absence and help them grow and realize all that he, Prabhupada, wanted them to. And so he did. And he was, of course, sitting in his ashram and contemplating certain verses over and over again, and penetrating deeply into their meaning and so forth. He was more in a bhajan status, if you will, than Prabhupada. So he did introduce the subtopics. So they weren't emphasized, I should say, by Prabhupada. But the way I answered the godbrother of mine, aside from that, was primarily that Sridhar Maharaj talked sometimes about higher topics, but what he did more was talk about lower topics in the highest way. It was very compelling, very powerful, very poetic too, philosophically insightful, bringing in other philosophers from the West and so forth, the famous ones and so forth, who he had been familiar with and whatnot. So I personally found it was a perfect fit for my disposition. And Guru Maharaj was very, 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 very kind to me, very generous with me. He called me in his room and privately. I spent a number of months there over a few years. I think I came under his good shelter in 1984 or 1985. A couple of my godbrothers had departed from ISKCON in 1982, based on the mandate from ISKCON that that those who wanted to take shiksha from anyone outside of ISKCON, the only one at the time was Sridhar Maharaja, there was their resolution was about him. They would have to leave ISKCON. They published a couple of books, Search for Sri Krishna, Sudhir Goswami Maharaj, and what was his name? Mukundamala. What his sannyas name was. But they were in California here, and Shri Guru and His Grace. I got the book, maybe Shri Guru and His Grace, maybe I think through Alwar Nath or Sajjan, and or his friend, our mutual friend, Markandeya. And when I read the book, Shri Guru and His Grace, then I began to weep in the middle of the book. I thought, no one can talk like this. I'm pretty good at talking, forgive me. But, and I was used to being able to turn people's heads around, sell them the book and preach to devotees and so forth. But Prabhupada could turn my head around. And when I heard the talks of Sridhar Maharaj, as they were published in the book, it just turned my head around. And in a way that I could understand, this is a leaf from the same tree that Prabhupada has fallen from. So I saw, here's the solution to the problem at the time of ISKCON. I got in touch with Sudhir Goswami Maharaj, and he very humorously said, well, if the incarnation of book distribution thinks our book is bona fide, it must be bona fide. And Prabhupada referred to me as the incarnation of book distribution. Anyway, yeah, it was very soothing, his advice, very comforting. And there was only a handful of us over the years that came from ISKCON, came under his good guidance. But I was fortunate to be one of them and spent, a fair amount of time going to the Math during Kartika or Gurpurnim. 1 month in particular, I spent there after Gurpurnim alone, as far as any other visitors. And I would swim across the Ganga every day and back and speak with Guru Maharaj about Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That's when I first read Bon Maharaja's edition, which is a translation and commentary on the first 4 chapters. So that was a very rewarding time for me to spend with in the Math. But he in his room, he told me that when I asked what service I can do, he said, you know everything. Swami Maharaj has told you everything. So you go out, start something, preach, and I'll be in the background. And if you need support, you draw upon me. So that's how we did. Most of us who were starting missions under his at his suggestion, his encouragement. And if we couldn't capture someone's faith, then we would bring them to Guru Maharaj personally, and leave it to him, to do that. So it was a very interesting period, and I was fortunate to be associated with him. I don't forget what year he left, maybe 88. I think he departed. So it seemed like forever, that he would never leave. And it seemed like that was Prabhupada. But of course, good things come to an apparent end anyway. But they go on if one looks beneath the surface and learns how to contact Sri Guru in their apparent absence. Guru Maharaj told me, Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj told me that in your Guru Maharaj's absence, you have 3 choices, he said. He said, you can become a guru and represent him. Find him in your heart, contact him in your heart, remain in his presence, and represent him to others. But that's not so easy, he said. Second choice is find someone who can do that and serve them. Third choice, get out of the way. If you can't do 1 or 2, get out of the way because somebody's going to do it. That's the system. Krishna says in Gita, what does he say? 4th chapter. Evam parampara praptam Imam Rajasha Yogitu, Sakalina Mahata Yoganashta Parantapa. This is the system, right? If there's some trouble, some breakup, some congestion in the line for distributing the teachings, then he comes again, right? And of course, I was experiencing it in the person of Srila Guru Maharaj himself, representing. I prayed to Prabhupada when Prabhupada was passing away. A few weeks before he passed away, we had a 24-hour kirtan in Vrindavan. And I was given a shift between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. I was by myself to chant. And Prabhupada had an assistant that was always in the vicinity. So I was there with the kartals chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. This was a very simple melody that Prabhupada introduced. It wasn't fancy. And I sang it with that in mind, not to be musical, but to be bona fide. It was simple, very, very enchanting melody at the same time. And I was thinking like that as I chanted it. I just want to be connected to the Guru Parampara. Prabhupada is passing away. That was my prayer and chanting for the pleasure of Prabhupada. So I was chanting, and then Prabhupada sat up a little bit, and the servant came right over. I was at his feet chanting, and Prabhupada said, "Who is that chanting?" And they said, "That's Tripurari Maharaj." And Prabhupada looked at me and gave me his blessing. And I realized when I met, when I came into the shelter of Guru Maharaj, that all of a sudden it all came back to me. Oh, Prabhupada had, at that time, blessed me. And here it is. Now I'm connected to the Guru Parampara in the person of my Siksha Guru, Bhakti Rakshak Srila Swami Maharaj. I mean, what can be said? He was had an auspicious birth in the Dham in Hapaniya. His destiny to be a great Gaudiya representative is clear and evident in his early life. The biographical notes that we have from his own testimony has been printed here and there. A very, very extraordinary person, and meeting the person of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, then his extraordinary role, I would call it, in the wide-scale dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It came to bear, came to be realized, and it was significant. Like I say, not many of us were able to understand his contribution at the time amongst my godbrothers, and but fortunately his words were recorded and published, and they've been widely circulated by now, and that kind of nourishment, if you will, has been played a significant role, I think. If I have any role whatsoever in the ongoing dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's certainly due to those two influences. What Prabhupada, as Guru Maharaj told me, put in my heart, and what Guru Maharaj told me to think about and spoke about himself, that it might be more apparent, the depths, the implications of it, to think about. He told me, Prabhupada, put everything in your heart, and now you have to reflect on it. What are the implications? And of course, with an able guide like him, it was much easier to do. We were thought to be rebels at the time by most of ISKCON and the greater sector of devotees. I remember sitting with Sudhir Goswami Maharaj when we were listening to Guru Maharaj, the lecture he was giving, and the subject of Mirabai came up. And so he was speaking about Mirabai as a famous devotee, but he's not a Gaudiya. I remember when after I left ISKCON, I started a magazine. It was called Clarion Call, and one of the articles I did an interview with the widows of Vrindavan, who are all Gaudiya Vaishnavis. And I went to the leader of the main math of widows, and I wanted to interview her. And in the context of interviewing her, I asked, "Do you ladies have a patron saint?" She didn't know quite what I meant, and then I was searching for a way to ask. We were right near the little Mirabai temple. I said, like Mirabai. Then she understood. She said, "Oh," and then she shook her head. No, no, to Mirabai. And she said, very beautifully, as her face just became like a big blooming lotus, Vishnu Priya. And I thought, boy, am I dumb that I couldn't think of that? Of course, Vishnu Priya, that's their patron saint. So, and we have all respect for Mirabai at the same time, but Guru Maharaj was answering a question about her. And he said that in Mirabai, we do not find in her songs, we find songs about her and Krishna, but we don't hear about Subal and Nanda and Yashoda and what's going on. This is all part of the Braj experience of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, then, as Prabhupada put it very simply, Krishna's never alone, right? It's not you and Krishna. And so he was speaking like this, and how in our bhajans, for example, from Narottam Thakur, Bhakti Vinod, all these associates are mentioned, and the locale, the sacredness of Govardhan, the Jamuna, and all these things are brought into the fore. As Raghunath Das Goswami prayed, what is his famous prayer to Guru? He says, Nama Shreshtam api Sachiputra Matra Surupam. He begins my obeisances to my Guru, by whose grace I have come in touch with Rup and Sanatan, and with Govardhan and Radha-kunda, Shyam-kunda, and so on. And Guru Maharaj's comment on this was, when we have understood, when we've come in touch with all of these things, then we can say we have understood Sri Guru. I loved that. I was so profound, right? I echoed it to another devotee who was questioning the book Sri Guru and His Grace in that statement, and I said, well, "What's your opinion?" He said, "Prabhupada gave us book distribution. That's what he gave us." And I thought, "Oh God, I'm glad I'm under the shelter of Guru Maharaj." But anyway, back to the Mirabai, right, lecture. He was explaining like this, that we don't find all these things brought out. Radha's, for example, why can't she unite with Krishna at Kurukshetra? Well, the Jamuna is not there. The groves are not there. Radha-kunda is not there. All these things are all extensions of that Madhurya Bhav, necessary, right? So he was pointing this out, and we looked at one another. Goswami Maharaj Sudhir Goswami, who was the main publisher of Guru Maharaj's books in those days. And we said, wow, this is so authorized. And we laughed because we thought, and they say we're not authorized, we're not bona fide. We feel like we're under the tight grip of the affectionate hand of Sri Guru. And when I was in the Math once visiting Madhu Mangal, who was a disciple of Guru Maharaj and a main kirtanier in the Math, he was blind, but he was the main kirtanier. I asked him, Madhu Mangal, I want to buy a mridanga. Can you come with me to the market to pick out a good mridanga? Now this is an elderly disciple of Guru Maharaj. He's blind. He's expert in playing the mridanga. He's living in the Math along the bank of the Ganga, and the market for purchasing the mridanga is a stone's throw away. So he said to me, yes, but let me ask Guru Maharaj's permission. Oh, I love that so much. I mean, I fall in Maya between here and the Mridanga, store along the bank of the Ganges in the Dham, doing it for a sannyasi who's preaching in the West, and you need a guru's permission for that. Yes. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but that's how I thought, oh, this is very beautiful. Very beautiful. That's how we felt. We were in his tight grip, and it could be tight. It could be very tight. I mean, he could be heavy at times. One of my godbrothers, Vidagda Madhava, who I think he took mantra diksha from Guru Maharaj. He, well, I shouldn't have mentioned his name, but anyway, it's a famous story. He once thought maybe I could get married, and there was a girl in the mat, Bengali girl, and he thought maybe that would be a good. So he asked Guru Maharaj, and Guru Maharaj said, "You must leave the mat now. Don't come back. Out." Kicked him out, just like that. No questions asked. No, Guru Maharaj, that wasn't very PC. You shouldn't have done it like that. Or that's it, gone. Later, he was brought back in, allowed to come back in, but that was like a heavy hand, if you will. But that heavy hand, if you were in it, grip, it felt very warm and very comforting, right? So this is our feeling, and it gave us strength to do what he asked us to do. Some of us to go and start a mission and do something, and he was always pushing us out. There was a couple of sannyasis, godbrothers of mine, who had taken sannyas from him maybe a few months or a year before I came under his shelter, and they were staying in the mat, and he asked me, "Can you take them out and get them doing something? Help me, get them out preaching and so forth." So he was always pushing us out to do that kind of work. Once he said to us, "If only I was younger, and I had all of you, we could really do something." Right? But he did something. He really did do something, even though our contributions were not always the best, and they're lacking still. Through some of us, and through, of course, Pujapad Govinda Maharaj, who was his chosen successor for the Math itself, which we always honored. His teaching has gone as wide and far as the mantra that he composed about the flag on the top of the Chaitanya Saraswat Math, which seemed at the time when he composed the verse to be like, "What are you talking about? It's flying all over the world." The flag of the Chaitanya Saraswat. Well, that was it. It was that mantra, that verse came to be realized largely through the campaign of Govinda Maharaj, and to some extent other persons like myself, and Guru Maharaj asked in a slightly different way to represent Prabhupada and himself also in terms of Gaudiya Siddhanta and its dissemination. So anyway, we're blessed to be speaking about him, to have the opportunity to say something. I could say much more, but I think I should stop and let others ask their questions. Pujapad Sri Radha Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Gaur Premanand.
I should mention that I forgot to mention that Sajjan Prabhu is also a direct Dixit disciple of Srila Sridhara Maharaj. There was a follow-up question from Omkar. He says, "Guru Maharaj, I was wondering if you have written anything about the pranama-mantra of Srila Sridhara Maharaj that we may use to delve deeper in our prayers to him."
I have that written, but I should. That's a very good suggestion. I lectured on that earlier this year. It must have been in honor of his disappearance. I think I was in Poland at the time. So I would assume that Govinda Maharaj composed the mantra, and it was approved by Guru Maharaj, pranama-mantra, Devam Saraswatim. I lectured on that, the meaning of each word and so forth. But it's a nice idea of you, Omkar. Thank you. to write a commentary on that pranama-mantra. It reminds me of the fact that I was in the Math when Govinda Maharaj recalled that Prabhupada had asked Guru Maharaj to write a pranama-mantra for him. But Guru Maharaj hadn't done it, and meanwhile Prabhupada had fashioned one himself. It had the second of two mantras, the second of which had a grammatical error that we could never correct, but we just sang it anyway. And so Govinda Maharaj reminded Guru Maharaj, and so he wanted to do that, and he let Govinda Maharaj compose. He composed 4 mantras, and Guru Maharaj approved them, added them, and made a slight change, and they're very insightful, compelling, accurate, deep, and so similarly is the pranama mantra for Guru Maharaj that I assume Govinda Maharaj was a Sanskritist, composed. So anyway, that lecture is available. I think I gave it in Poland. You can look it up at Swami, it's at, what is it, swami.org. There, I think all my lectures are there. What else?
Okay, there is a question from Sri Radha from the Brighton Sangha.
You can ask.
Oh, hello. My question to Guru, to Tripurari Swami is, what I wanted to know is that when spiritual masters, gurus, they're not burnt, they're buried into the earth. Now, Srila Prabhupada, because he was so Christianized, even though his soul left the body, did the vibrations of where he was buried, his samadhi, did that help everyone who came there? Did it pass in? Did it help them? And did it help Mother Earth? Does that make sense?
I understand your question. Thank you. It's customary, of course, in Hinduism to cremate the body. But for sadhus, acharyas, saints, who have thought to have perfected their spiritual life, especially within Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we have an idea like this. We have 2 bodies. We have a sadhaka deha and a siddha deha. Sadhaka deha is the practitioner's body. And, excuse me, we get that at the time of initiation. This is explained by Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Sanatana Goswami, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Diksha Kale, at the time of Diksha, one gets a body that's chiranandamaya. May not feel like that, but it's a work in progress. It's in potential, and initiation doesn't happen in a moment either. The implications of that initiation is an aspect of sambandha gyan. When the sambandha gyan, sambandha means relationship, is actualized, realized, then one's abhideya, one's practice, is fully informed. This is Bhava Bhakti. So at that time, initiation is complete. The sambandha is complete. And the abhideya now is fully fueled. So there's a kind of practice, if you will, in Bhava Bhakti also. At that time, the sadhaka deha is perfected. And as this sadhaka deha is perfected, it becomes chidanandamaya, spiritualized, if you will. Prabhupada used to give the example of gold and a gold-plated box. So for all intents and purposes, the gold-plated box acts like a gold box. What happens is that when bhakti takes over the antakarana, the subtle body, then, well, the gross body follows the subtle body. You leave the body in this gross body in a subtle body, and according to your subtle body, you're going to get another gross body. But if you're antakarn, your subtle body is fully spiritualized, and bhava is imprinted on the chitta, which has been cleansed of all other samskars, vasanas. Then understand that I'm just explaining the philosophically the idea is the gross body becomes spiritualized. It's now working. This is mentioned in the Gita. Mahatmanastu mam parta, daivim prakriti mashrita. Mahatmanastu mam parta, daivim prakriti mashrita. Mahatmas, if you look carefully, this is the 9th chapter of the Gita. Krishna has spoken about different types of practices and so forth. And but Mahatmas, they are under my divine Shakti, Daivim Prakriti. This means Swarup Shakti. They're moving in the world like everyone else, but the force that's driving them is not karma. It's the Swarup Shakti. It's not the Maya Shakti. So in that sense, they've got a spiritualized body, right? Sanatana Mahaprabhu wanted to throw his body under the Rath Yatra cart. He thought it was unfit to be in the association of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who might embrace him. But Mahaprabhu stopped him and gave him this instruction. I have things I want to do through your body. So the point is that as the sadhaka deha is a work in progress, it is made of senses. The senses are in touch with sense objects. As much as they're in touch with sense objects for their own sake, as much as the material false identity is fortified, continued, perpetuated. As much as my senses are in touch with sense objects for the pleasure of Krishna's senses, well, obviously a different identity is going to arise from that. Our present identity as a male or a female or a British citizen or Indian or what may be the case, our likes and dislikes, our sense of my is where our sense of I derives from. And it's false because nothing is ours. But if we change this simple equation and our senses are in touch with sense objects, our hearing, our seeing, our tasting, for the pleasure of Krishna's senses, will that not create an identity also? Give rise to an identity? It will not create, but give rise to an identity? Yes, it will. A spiritual identity, right? So point is that people want to get a siddha deha. They want to get a spiritual body, but they don't know how to do it. They can talk about it, but how to do it? You have to do it by perfecting your sadhaka deha. And you have to give all of your energy to it. You can't give less and get it. So it may take time. Don't be neurotic here, but that's the price to pay, right? So you put this body in the fire of sacrifice, and out will come, from within it will come another identity, the siddha deha. And in Bhava Bhakti, one can be functioning in a practicing sense in that internal siddha deha. So the sadhu that attains bhava has purified his sadhaka deha, the visible body. And therefore, rather than cremating it, as you say, right, they make it's preserved in a sense and put into what we call a samadhi. Samadhi means trance, right? Going in yadgatva nivartante tadama paramam, going there, one never comes back, right? So your question is that when that happened, when the sadhu's body, the acharya's body, the guru's body is placed in samadhi, there's a ritual and so forth, and then a shrine may be built and so forth. Does that purify the land? Does that purify people that come there? Right? Yes, is the answer. It's very interesting because the guru is not the body. Teaches that, but that's the beginning teaching. We look at it on a little bit higher level. The guru is the body, and the devotee is his or her body, as much as his or her body is actually used as a devotee. As much as our senses are only engaged in the service of Krishna for the pleasure of his senses, then our body made up of senses is now worshipable. It has some spiritual power to it, if you will. And so, therefore, for example, if the sadhu should pass away, but we petition the sadhu, as we do, that sadhu may appear in our dream, in that body. Right? Or we take the picture, now that we have cameras, we have too many cameras now. They didn't used to have them in the days gone by, but you take the picture and you put it on the altar. So there's an eternity to that body also. Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari. He's a young teenage girl in his Siddhadeha, but he has a practitioner's body in which he appears in Caitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila as looking like Rupa Goswami, but just younger, like a kishore, like a young adolescent. So if you took Sridhara Maharaj's body, made it like a young adolescent, everybody looks very good in their adolescence. They put their picture, people my age, sometimes they put their adolescent pictures on Facebook of themselves. Okay. So like that in Gaur Lila. We have an identity in Gaur Lila and an identity in Krishna Lila. The identity in Gaur Lila for Gaudiya Vaishnavism is as a Brahmin boy. We think, well, my Sadhikadeha is a woman. What am I going to look like? I'm going to look like a Brahmin boy, but you still look like yourself to some extent. Be recognizable, if you will. So yes, it's a spiritual, it's a spiritualized and more, if you will, body. And so there's a place in Vrindavan called 64 Samadhis, or 64 some sacred burial places for so many associates of Mahaprabhu. Auspicious place to go. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Now one more.
Yeah.
The way the world is, I don't get entangled in it now. Well, I'm not old anyway. But what I've sensed is that there's a continual, circle going round the globe, going round the world, and going round the universe. This is from sages, from devotees, from sadhus, I don't know, but I sense that they're chanting right round the globe and right round the world and the universe, and that this vibration is pouring down onto the earth and is purifying everything that it touches. So whatever's happening in the war, Krishna's in charge, and we don't know whether he set it up that they kill off each other or whatever, but there is this I sense there's this continual circle of chanting going round and round from above. Is that a silly question?
Well, no questions are silly. We're more silly for not asking questions because we think they're silly. So that's one part of my answer. But I think that there's a couple of ways to think about that. And I do think that it's all right in a general sense to think as you are, that with the appearance of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the inauguration of the Yuga Dharma, and so forth, Um, you see a large campaign in recent, in modern history on the part of Bhakti Vinod, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his disciples, my Guru Maharaj, and so forth. And it may come again and go further and so forth. That the influence of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is expanding in the world. And with it come many misconceptions about Gaudiya Vaishnavism within the spreaders, even. I remember used to think as a kid, if the young man, if the United States would all become accept, Krishna consciousness as the goal, there'd probably be a whole lot of preaching to do to all kinds of people who would have misunderstood it, misrepresented it. We see that in Bengal. Caitanya Mahaprabhu came, so many people were influenced by him, and then so many people misrepresented him as well. So anyway, that's part of the territory. But still, by and large, that influence is spreading in academia. Gaudiya Vaishnavism is by far the most interesting theological sect. It has so much nuance, so rich in depth, color, and feeling, and so forth. Compared to Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, even other forms of Vaishnavism, Abrahamic traditions, and it's showing up in academia. So there are ways, if no one knows how to look, to kind of affirm what you're saying. That the influence of Gaudiya Vaishnavism by put in place by sadhus, and after their departure, that well-wishing is momentum is still there, and so forth. And there's a way of thinking it. But there's another side to it as well. The other side to it is we're a small blip here on Earth among many universes. I'll give an example. There was a Brahmin in South India, Caitanya Mahaprabhu met. He had leprosy. And there were worms that were feeding on the open sores on his body. And when they fell off, he would pick them up and put them back on. So they'd get their dinner. Mahaprabhu met him and embraced him, and all of the open sores of his leprosy just disappeared. He prayed to Caitanya Mahaprabhu. I think it was him, Vasudeva the leper. It was either him or another Vasudeva. Anyway, I forget, but prayed that he could accept the karma of all of the jivas in the universe, and that they would all be delivered. Kind of a bodhisattva vow, if you will, from a Buddhist, in Buddhist terminology. Let me stay in the world and accept the suffering of all the jivas in the universe. Let them all go back to Godhead, and then I will follow. Mahaprabhu appreciated his compassion, but then he said, this universe is like one she-goat amongst a herd of cows. His way of saying, if you can deliver the whole universe, material existence is always going to go on. There's an end to the world of samsara. It has no beginning. It has no end. It begins and ends, with the ingoing and outgoing, so to speak, breath of Mahavishnu. But that his breath has, as he has no beginning and no end, so does his breath. So the worlds come and go, contract and expand, contract and expand, and will always, always, always be going on. That is samsara. So we should really try to use the inspiration that we may draw from the idea of saving the world to save ourselves. We may be inspired by the idea and we may pursue it, but we should pursue it and take inspiration from it such and it further drives or underscores the need for ourselves to become delivered from material existence. Charity begins at home, they say. So if you can deliver yourself, well, then you'll be in a better position to deliver others. I should say it like this: don't lose sight of delivering yourself in the name of wanting to save the world. I was famous for distributing Prabhupada's books by his grace. And when he was first told about my exploits, if you will, and how many books I had distributed, one of my godbrothers wrote to Prabhupada. Prabhupada wrote back, "It's very nice that Tripurari is selling so many books." And so, and then he put an asterisk after that, typed message in his own handwritten note. With the asterisk, he said, "But make sure he's always reading the books also. He should be sure to read them." So, and that was a kind of a thing. Of course, I did that. That was a kind of a thing, to go back to Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. That's kind of a thing that we were much preoccupied in Prabhupada's mission with outreach and so forth. And Guru Maharaj came at a time where it's like, okay, your Guru Maharaj has left. Now's the time to look inward and reflect on what he said. Look deeply into the books that you're selling so many of. What did they say about you? How you should. So I always looked at it like that. If you go out to preach, to sell a book, maybe you'll meet somebody that knows more than you do, right? And help you. I remember one time I was in an ISKCON temple. The devotees had gone on Sankirtan. They came back and they came into the lobby, and I was there of the temple. And they said, "Mars, some guy followed us back here, and we don't know what to do with him, He's got a long beard and stuff like that." And so I said, "Well, let him come in." So he comes in there, the beard, the long hair, and I looked at him. He looked at me, and we went and embraced one another. He was one of my godbrothers who had lost focus. He saw the Sankirtan party, and he followed them back. 3 days later, he became the Bhakta leader in the temple, shaved up, and he was the leader of those who had brought him back and thought he was maybe a little weird. So you never know what you'll find. We go out to purify ourselves, right? Purify ourselves. And that's, as much as we're part of the world, then we're purifying the world. So don't lose sight of that. Not that you have.
Because I realized that Krishna is pure love, and that everything created has come from his love. There's nothing in this world that he didn't create out of love for us, and that we've got to learn to remember this and serve him.
Yes, it is said, Lokavatu Lila Kaivalyam. So we ask if there's any love in the world. Well, Vedanta Sutra says, Lokavatu Lila Kaivalyam. It is out of love the world became manifest. The one became many. For what reason? For no reason. And love knows no reason. It doesn't. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki jai.
Say to you, back here on Sunday with Madame Mahana Mahini. We're back here with Madame Mahana Mahini and your presence, and thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Omkar posted an interesting thing. It seems that there's a new book out it's a compilation of Srila Sridhara Maharaja's talks about the Gita. It's called the Gitamritam, and there's a link here in the chat if anybody wants to check it out. It is published by Gauranga. Oh yeah, they have it there already. Wonderful. You guys are one step ahead, huh? Really nice. So anybody who wants to purchase it or check it out, there's a link in the chat. So take a look. And the last thing I want to say is that this coming Thursday, it is going to be Kishore Krishna who's giving the class on Thursday at 8:30 Central Time. And it's going to be Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamrita Prelude. So it's nicely, aligned with today's talk. Okay, that's it. I'll see you all next week. Hari Hari Bol.